Hello, welcome back to the channel. This is Heather with Creativity by Heather B.E. I hope you're having a fabulous day. Today I am showing you a condolence card that I created using some products from Simon Says Stamp, Altenew, and also my Zig Clean Clear Brush Markers. So the first stamp set that I'm using here is by Altenew. It's called Prettiest Pomander. And this is a layering set, and I love the Altenew layering sets because they give you very specific directions. They give you ideas on how to use the stamp sets. They really go above and beyond to get your creativity going and to make it as simple as possible. For this card in particular, I'm not going to be using the layering. I'm only going to use the final stamp that is the entire thing stamped out together. And I had originally planned on stamping this out on both angles of the card, so both corners, so that way they were the same, and which is why I have the line drawn down the center of my card diagonally, but I'm actually going to change that, and I'm only going to stamp it on one side. So I'm using my anti-static powder tool because I'm going to be doing some heat embossing, and I'm using watercolor paper. This is Tim Holtz watercolor paper. So it has a lot of texture to it, which is why one of the reasons I wanted to make sure I was using my Misty Stamp Positioning tool. And I'm going to be heat embossing with Alabaster embossing powder by Brutus Monroe. So I am using the Brutus Monroe embossing ink and stamping this up and placing that down in the center. So I'm starting with the full one. And the reason that I stamped the full flower ball first and went ahead and heat embossed it is because then I can add a mask to it and I can stamp on either side and heat emboss those at the same time. So it made more sense to start in the center. So I'm going to add my Alabaster embossing powder, and this is a great white, stark white color embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. So I'm just adding that, and it's hard to tell on camera because it was the white on white, but once everything gets heat set and you tip it to the light, there you can kind of see where the light caught it. It was a little bit easier for me to see it. So I'm using my Tonic brush and just kind of brushing away any additional embossing powder. And I stamped out and created a mask using the stamp. And I was trying to line it up. It was a little difficult for me to see where to line it up correctly. So I finally got it lined up, and I apologize for my head being in the way. And I'm going to put that panel back into my Misty Stamping tool, and now I'm going to be able to add embossing ink again on both sides and then put embossing powder on each side of those at the same time. So this just allowed me to only have to create one mask and fussy cut out one mask because I don't like to fussy cut. And it allowed me to save a little bit of time by being able to put the embossing powder and heat set those at the same time. So when you're laying out your card designs, if you're doing something like this, especially with masking, kind of think about what is the easiest way that you're going to have to create the least amount of mask and move those masks the least amount of time. And that'll kind of make your card go a little bit smoother and maybe cause a little bit less frustration. So I'm stamping it on the other side, and now I'm going to take that Alabaster embossing powder again and put it on either side of the flower. And you can see it's stamped over it, of course, because I had the mask on there, and I'm going to add the embossing powder right to it. This mask will still come off relatively easy, even though I'm going to heat emboss it. So I'm just making sure I have everything covered, and now I'm going to take my heat tool. And the reason that I'm using the embossing powder and heat setting it is because I want that to be my little kind of well for when I'm doing my watercolor brushes. So anytime I'm doing watercoloring, I am not good at watercoloring, so for me to be able to use that embossing, and then it makes it easier, so everything kind of stays put. So I am using the guide that came with the stamp set there off to the left, just so I can kind of see where my flowers are, where my leaves are, where the different color flowers are. And I'm going to be using some purple, like lavender type colors, darker colors, greens, and primarily turquoises for this. So I'm going in with my watercolor pen, and I'm just laying down some color, and then I'm going to go back in with a watercolor brush, or excuse me, a water brush, and I'm going to pull that color out. And I don't have any water in my water brush right there. I'm actually dipping it into a cup of water because I feel like it gives me a little bit more control, especially with the smaller area that I was working with. So if you struggle with that, using the water brushes and having water in them, that could be a little tip, is dump the water out and just dip them into a cup of water and see if that helps you have a little bit more control. So once I go through and I'm going to do all of my purple, and then I'm going to go back in and do some greens. I'm going to do that turquoise color. I'm also going to do a little bit of a darker color purple. So I'm going to speed this up. And if you have not used the Zig Clean Clear brush markers and you're kind of intimidated by watercolor, any type of watercolor marker like this is a great place to start. I know Arteza has some as well that people really like. This was the first set that I ever bought, so I just continue to use these. I think I got them off of Amazon at a fairly good price, but I've heard the Arteza are very comparable as well. So I have everything, all of my flowers are colored in now, and you can see I just kind of decided to keep it on that side, and I'm glad I did. I felt like if I put it on the other side, it might be a little bit too busy. So I am going to take one of the sky blue color markers, and I'm just going along the edging there. I didn't want the white from the embossing to be such a stark contrast onto the other color. So I'm just going in and adding some color edging, and then I'm going to once again take a water brush that doesn't have any water in it and just pull that color out a little bit. And once I get this color pulled out, I was trying to decide if I wanted to watercolor the entire rest of that white panel or how I wanted to fill that color in. And what I'm ultimately decided to do was to use some Distress Oxide. And this is Broken China, I believe. Actually, no, it's not Broken China. Broken China is not that light. It is Tumbled Glass. I'm sorry. Tumbled Glass is what that is. So I'm using the Tumbled Glass, and I'm also using one of my life-changing brushes from Picket Fence Studios. And I'm just going over this, and I'm not really concerned about getting a nice, even blend on here. It is watercolor paper, which makes it a little bit more difficult because watercolor paper is textured, but also as whenever I do any type of sky background like this, the sky is never a perfect color blue. You're going to have some little white patches sticking out of it and things like that. So I don't really get too concerned about that. And for the sentiment, and also I'm going to add some butterflies, I'm using the Simon Says Stamp Comfort and Prayer set. And this is a great stamp set to have when you have to do cards like this, which nobody enjoys making cards like this. But this set really makes it easier and really gives you a lot of nice ideas on ways that you could create a card. There are four different butterflies on this set, and I decided to use one facing sideways and put it up at the top, and then I'm also going to put a full front facing butterfly down at the bottom. And I'm going to heat emboss this using the Brutus Monroe embossing ink. And this embossing ink is the Eggplant color, and I love this. It's a really dark color of embossing powder. So once I get that on, I'm going to use my watercolor markers again, and I'm going to just do very simple coloring. I'm going to add some light purple to the bottom, and then I'm going to add a little bit of that turquoise color to the top, and I'm going to finish it out with some of the gray. And for the sentiment, I decided to add Prayers in This Difficult Time, and this is all sentiments that came from the stamp set. There's also, where the Prayers is larger in that font, there's a Comfort that's in that same font, which is really nice. This is a really good set to have in your stash for these cards that you need. And I am using the VersaFine black ink to stamp that out. And I did actually have to stamp it twice because it is on watercolor paper, like I said, which has the texture. So now I'm going back in with my markers, and I am just doing the darker purple down at the inside of the wings and just pulling that out with the water. And then, like I said, I'm going to take a gray and go in and do the bodies on both of the butterflies. So I didn't do any type of special blending. I only used one marker and then the water on the butterflies. I really just wanted them to kind of be that extra added touch, but to keep most of it with the flowers as kind of the focal point. Although I do love the way that purple butterfly came out. I think it really pops off that blue background. And condolence cards, like I said, are just some of the most difficult cards to make because we're making them for somebody obviously who's in some pain. And I think this one is a great option, and this is why I love the stamp set so much, because it has the butterflies in it, so it's not, you know, so dark and kind of depressing as people are in that state, but it kind of reminds them that, you know, life does go on and gives them a little bit of color back in their life. You know, handmade cards do so much for people that we don't even realize. And so this is, I just can't say enough about this set. I love this set from Simon Says Stamp. I'm going to add some 3M foam tape to the back of my panel. I wanted to give it some dimension, and I also wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to go anywhere. The watercolor paper is thicker, obviously, and so I'm just peeling that off, and I'm going to add this onto a 110-pound Neenah card base. And I decided to just leave the panel at size. I didn't want to mat it or have any additional showing. I just wanted to leave the panel the way it was. So that's it for this video. I hope that this gave you some tips and maybe some ways when you're struggling to make those condolence cards. And I highly encourage you to check out the stamp set. Actually, both of these are great stamp sets. Thank you so much for watching today. If you're not a subscriber, I hope that you'll consider subscribing. And if you do, don't forget to hit that little bell so that way you'll be notified of future videos. Thank you so much and have a great day.